Hiking along America's wildland trails is increasingly popular and fun unless you run into something like this. Wet, mucky, boggy trails could make an otherwise pleasant hike messy and uncomfortable. Fact is, most hikers try to avoid such areas. Even horses tend to skirt the edges of wet trails. If not corrected, it leads to soil compaction, trail hardening, sedimentation, multiple trails, and unhappy trail users. The solution seems obvious: relocate the trail. A new location should bypass the boggy area, be on a slope for better drainage, and have a mineral soil base. But that kind of careful scouting takes time to do right. While it's time well spent and the preferred solution, relocation is often simply not possible. Fortunately, there are alternatives, sometimes as simple as laying stepping stones or improving the drainage with water bars, drainage ditches, or culverts. But if simpler solutions aren't feasible, costly solutions like bridges or boardwalks will have to be considered. But in most parts of the country, two other types of structures are more common and less costly. The turnpike, which creates a raised walkway using fill material, and a puncheon, a wood walkway that resembles the familiar log stringer trail bridge. In this video, we're going to focus on how to construct and maintain both turnpikes and puncheons. Turnpikes can be recognized as raised walkways or causeways across bog holes. Parallel side ditches provide the fill necessary to raise the trail base above the surrounding area. In areas of high water and fair to well-drained soils, turnpikes provide a stable trail base. Any major trail work needs to be planned in advance. A report called a design narrative identifies trail users and construction design standards. A design narrative considers environmentally sensitive factors, scenic concerns, direction from planning efforts, and accessibility needs for less abled people. Ask to review it before you start construction. To construct a turnpike, you'll need these materials: rocks, peeled logs, or treated timbers as retainers, geotextile material, stakes, various nails and spikes, and either firm mineral soil, coarse-grained soil, granular material, or well-graded angular rock for fill material. The first step in turnpike construction is to clear the site. No one has invented an automatic trail clearing tool yet, so most trail clearing is still done by hand, and I'm afraid will continue that way. However, fire line or linear explosives are proving very effective for trail clearing and for creating ditches through bog holes. Explosives may be an excellent alternative to work by hand, but only if a certified blaster is available. Once the site is cleared, the next step is staking out the location. Always extend out at least 10 feet beyond the wet area at each end to allow for unusually wet conditions. The area cleared should be wide enough to allow for the trail width, retainer logs or rocks, and the side ditches. Bear in mind that while a hiking trail may have a tread width less than 3 feet in total width, pack stock requires a minimum of 3 feet between the turnpike retainers. After determining the width of the turnpike, dig ditches parallel to the trail on either side. Depending on runoff and topography, ditches are generally 12 inches below the base of the trail tread. The ditch should be dug flat on the bottom, with sides angling up at about a 45-degree angle. Since the soil condition doesn't always cooperate and can slough off into the ditch, different slope angles and bottom widths might be needed. It also helps to extend the ditch beyond the turnpike. This helps control water that might otherwise flow onto the trail. If the excavated material from the base is too mucky to add to the trail tread, spread it outside the trail. There are many ways to move water away from the turnpike. A leadoff ditch on the lower side of the trail, a rock culvert under the trail, a French drain of open graded aggregate wrapped in geotextile, or a corrugated plastic or metal culvert. Use full-sized culverts rather than PVC pipe. They tend to avoid clogging and are easier to clean. Open-top cross drains are not recommended on stock trails. Once the trail area is cleared and the drainage completed, it's time to create the trail base. Geotextiles play an important role in trail turnpike construction. Most geotextile fabrics used in road construction are suitable for turnpikes. The fabric should allow water to pass through but have 3/10 millimeter minimum opening or less to prevent silt from passing through. The fabric serves as a barrier between the silty, mucky soil beneath the fabric and the mineral, coarse-grained or granular soil used as tread material on top of the geotextile. This separation is vital because it only takes silt or clay contamination of a mere 20%, and the soil takes on the all-too-familiar characteristics of good old mud. Another separation and drainage technique is called encapsulation, or more commonly, the sausage technique. One more possibility, used sparingly because it's expensive, utilizes a plastic reinforcing webbing called geogrid. Geogrid is laid over the geotextile before adding the fill. It adds support strength. Geotextile is easy to use, and if not ordered in the right width to begin with, it can be easily cut with a razor blade knife. Entire or partial rolls can be trimmed with a chainsaw. It's a judgment call whether or not you need to remove some of the trail muck before placing the geotextile. Where fabrics join, they should overlap 24 inches. Geotextile should go under the rock or log retainers. Anchor the geotextile at both ends. Now it's time for the retainers. Retainers, or curbs, hold the tread material within the turnpike. Use rocks rather than logs as retainers when possible. Set the rocks firmly in place in one continuous row on both sides of the tread. Peeled logs, at least 6 inches in diameter and of a rot-resistant species, can also be used. Treated timbers are another good choice. If you use logs, notch them together, creating a splice. Painting the notch with preservative ensures it will last longer. Lay the logs along each edge of the trail tread and anchor with stakes or rocks. Treated timbers can be anchored by drilling holes and driving rebar. Next, high-quality fill material is placed between the retainers. If the soil from the excavated ditches is good, it can serve as fill. If the excavated material is unsuitable, fill material must be brought to the site. There are lots of ways to haul in fill material, using livestock, motorized carriers, wheelbarrows, and buckets. All of them involve hard work. Be sure to completely bury the geotextile since it breaks down when exposed to ultraviolet rays. If you have chosen not to use geotextile, place rock or mineral soil as a subbase for your turnpike. Fill the trail until the crown of the tread is at least 2 inches above the retainers. To keep water from flowing onto the structure from the end, build a water bar, dip, or drain at the end of the turnpike. Keep the approaches as straight as possible so motorbike and stock users won't cut corners and run in ditches. To complete the turnpike, mulch, seed, and fertilize the disturbed areas. While turnpikes can last 25 to 40 years, only with maintenance every 1 or 2 years will they realize their full life. Periodic clearing of the ditches is essential. Clean them out at least 12 inches deep or back to their original depth. If the vegetation surrounding a turnpike helps support it, do not disturb it. Recrown the turnpike and fill in any holes or depressions. Recrowning is particularly important the year after the original construction. Inspect the retainer logs or rocks and replace any that are missing. Also reseat any that are loose. Be sure and check the stakes outside the edges if logs were used. This is the second type of structure we're going to build, a puncheon. It's basically a wood walkway used to cross bogs or deep muskeg, to bridge boulder fields, or to cross small streams. Puncheons are preferred over turnpikes where there's no firm mineral soil base and where drainage is a problem. It's often the choice where there's no source of suitable fill material for a turnpike. Puncheons have an advantage over bridges and boardwalks because they cost less. But when crossing spans of more than 20 feet, or areas 5 feet or more in height, or for crossing a large stream, puncheons are not suitable. Build a trail bridge instead. However, bridges require special designs fitted to on-site conditions, so you'll need to obtain advance approval from engineering. Now let's take a closer look at an actual puncheon, which to most eyes resembles a short version of the familiar log stringer trail bridge. It consists of a deck of treated timbers or native logs, which are placed on stringers to elevate the trail across difficult-to-drain wet areas. If you look closely, you'll see that the stringers are resting on mud sills partly buried in the ground. Although some puncheons are set above the surface, most are like this one, flush with the surface or only slightly elevated. To build a puncheon, you'll need the following materials: treated timbers or native logs to use as stringers and mud sills, split or milled planks as decking, and spikes, galvanized nails, or lag bolts. As we discussed earlier, the analysis that went into the design narrative should help answer such questions as how wide to build the puncheon, whether to use treated or native wood, who will use the trail, and any special requirements you need to know about. Begin the construction of the puncheon by first installing the mud sills. Native logs, treated posts, short treated planks, even precast concrete parking lot curbs are suitable. The sills are laid in trenches at both ends of the area to be bridged, set at right angles to the trail, and be level side to side. Sills are also necessary at 6 to 10 foot intervals between the outside sills. Mud sills should be as long as practical, up to a maximum of 8 feet for best stability. Bury the sill 2/3 into firm ground. If firm footing does not exist, then use rock and fill to solidify the trench. Longer sills also give better flotation. Here's a good hint. Wrapping the rock and fill in geotextile minimizes the amount of fill required. If you're using planks, nail them together until the combined height of mud sills, stringers, and decking will be even with the trail grade. Drainage may be needed between mud sills to allow water to flow underneath and away from the structure. A drainage ditch on the uphill side with a culvert under the puncheon is often the best. Stringers of native logs or treated timbers are then set on top of the sills. Native logs used for stringers on livestock trails should be at least 12 inches in diameter. They should be matched in length and diameter and be at least 12 feet long. 2 stringers are enough for hiking trails, but 3 are recommended for livestock trails. The stringer should lay flat or at no more than a 5% grade. Make sure that a mud sill is placed on each side of a joint under the stringers. These 2 mud sills should not be more than 2 feet apart. Nail a tie stringer to the double mud sill. If logs are used, notch the underside of the stringers where they lay on the mud sills. This stabilizes and levels the stringers. Do not notch the mud sill because notching allows water to penetrate and rot the sill. Be sure the stringer is thick enough to carry weight of the trail traffic you expect. Cut any high spots from the stringer with an adze or saw. Toenail spikes through the stringers and into the mud sill. The stringers need to be level so when the decking is applied, the entire puncheon will be level side to side. To hold the stringers in place, drill a pilot hole. Treat the hole and any other cut surfaces with preservative and drive 1/2-inch rebar at least 4 inches into the mud sill. Cut the rebar flush with the top of the stringer once it is driven to the point of refusal. Next comes the decking. Decking can be made by splitting log rounds or bolts on site, or by hauling in planks treated with preservative. In all but the most remote areas, treated lumber is usually preferred. For a puncheon used by stock, the deck can be made from 3-inch thick rough or 2-inch thick treated planks. Decking lengths can be as short as 18 inches for a limited hiker-only puncheon without curbs and up to 4 to 5 feet for stock use. The design narrative should give you some guidance. Place each piece with the tree growth rings curving down to encourage water runoff. This prevents cupping. Spike each piece of decking to the stringers. Do not spike to the center stringer if you have one. Center spikes work themselves out in time and become a tripping hazard. To allow water to run between the planks, leave at least a 3/4 inch gap. For stock trails, running planks are often added to increase the lifespan of the deck. You can use untreated wood here. In this case, leave no gap between the running planks. Curb logs, also called bull rails, should be peeled logs or treated timbers at least 10 feet long and at least 6 inches in diameter. Set the curb logs on 1 to 2 inch wood spacers to provide for drainage under the curb log. Anchor them with 3/8 inch steel drift pins, rebar, or lag bolts. To finish the puncheon, place a bulkhead or backing plate at each end of the structure. It should fill the space between the top of the deck and the bottom of the stringer. If it stays in place, do not use spikes as they will trap water and cause the stringers to rot faster. To complete the puncheon, compact mineral soil and rock to build approaches. They should be straight for at least 10 feet. Decking is often wet and slippery, so any curves approaching or even on the deck add to the risk of slipping, especially to bike riders in stock. The approach should have a rising grade of 5% from ground level up to the puncheon. This prevents water on the trail from flowing onto the puncheon. Remember, the puncheon must extend far enough to solid mineral soil so that soft spots do not develop at either end. A final note, in rare cases where a puncheon is constructed on grades over 5%, treat the surface with cleats, commercial fish netting, or other surfacing to prevent slipping. Now, some deep bogs, which are wet all year, are better suited to a slightly different approach, a subsurface puncheon. The major difference between a regular puncheon and a subsurface puncheon is that the mud sills and stringers are under the surface, and the decking is almost flush with the ground. The key to this design is continual water saturation. The stringers should not alternate between wet and dry conditions. Soil from the excavation should be piled in the middle of the stringers to help keep this section wet. The tread surface between the curb logs on a subsurface puncheon should be filled with a layer of gravel, wood chips, or soil. Puncheon maintenance consists of replacing rotted, broken, or split running planks, decking, stringers, or curb logs. Where gravel, soil, or wood surface material has washed away, it should be replaced. Clean ditches and make sure that drainage is clear under curb logs. Check the bulkhead or backing plate for rot and replace if necessary. Trail users, our customers, appreciate your good work. Wet area trail construction and maintenance present special challenges and require a lot of skill. Your mastery of those skills will be evident not only in the trails, but in the gratitude of those who use them. Relocate the trail. A new location should bypass the boggy area, be on a slope for better drainage, and have a mineral soil base. But that kind of careful scouting takes time to do right. While it's time well spent and the preferred solution, relocation is often simply not possible. Fortunately, there are alternatives, sometimes as simple as laying stepping stones or improving the drainage with water bars, drainage ditches, or culverts. But if simpler solutions aren't feasible, costly solutions like bridges or boardwalks will have to be considered. But in most parts of the country, two other types of structures are more common and less costly. The turnpike, which creates a raised walkway using fill material, and a puncheon, a wood walkway that resembles the familiar log stringer trail bridge. In this video, we're going to focus on how to construct and maintain both turnpikes and puncheons. Turnpikes can be recognized as raised walkways or causeways across bog holes. Parallel side ditches provide the fill necessary to raise the trail base above the surrounding area. In areas of high water and fair to well-drained soils, turnpikes provide a stable trail base. Hiking along America's wildland trails is increasingly popular and fun unless you run into something like this. Wet, mucky, boggy trails could make an otherwise pleasant hike messy and uncomfortable. Fact is, most hikers try to avoid such areas. Even horses tend to skirt the edges of wet trails. If not corrected, it leads to soil compaction, trail hardening, sedimentation, multiple trails, and unhappy trail users. The solution seems obvious. Any major trail work needs to be planned in advance. A report called a design narrative identifies trail users and construction design standards. A design narrative considers environmentally sensitive factors, scenic concerns, direction from planning efforts, and accessibility needs for less abled people. Ask to review it before you start construction. To construct a turnpike, you'll need these materials: rocks, peeled logs, or treated timbers as retainers, geotextile material, stakes, various nails and spikes,